now on. That was definitely amazing. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We've got about 20 or so people here, so ready to dive in. My name is Bethany Mackey, for those of you whom I haven't met. I'm the Managing Director here at Progressive Multiplier, and we have a very, very special edition of Fundraising Friday this week. So last week, if you were with us, we did a wrap-up session for all of the themes we've been talking about since October throughout the pandemic of how to build the bottle. So what are the systems of rigor and the audience approaches and the interdepartmental collaborations you need to have set up to take advantage of those moments, whether they be, as you'll hear today, some very national scale moments and some very local scale moments or celebrity infusion moments where you have all of a sudden more attention on your cause that can be ripe for great communication and fundraising moments. I am beyond honored and humbled to have some very special guests with us today. I will hand it over to my movement colleague, Rachel Baker, in a second. Rachel is with the Leaders Trust, formerly Haas Leadership Initiatives, and Rachel has been such a fantastic partner to the Progressive Multiplier and supportive of our work. So Rachel's thrilled to have you here. And then our trainers for today, Robert Bray, our communications guru from Neo Philanthropy. Neo also a supporter of the Progressive Multiplier and makes all of our programming possible. Marjorie Fine, my fellow fundraiser in crime, that is also one of Neo's fantastic consultants, and Adela De La Torre, who is an alumna of Milk, who you've heard Tiffany here as one of our regular Fundraising Friday participants. So we are just so lucky to be closing out our current academic year with this special panel. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Obviously, I see a lot of familiar names, and I know you guys, but our trainers don't. So please introduce yourself and your organizations so that we can really get the conversation going. And with that, I will hand it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Bethany, and thank you so much, Bethany and Progressive Multiplier, for inviting us to join your Fundraising Fridays community. And we're really thrilled to be collaborating with you and also with the Resilience Initiative and the Leaders Trust on this today. And most of all, I just want to say welcome to all of you here for joining us today. I want you to know that that for all of us, I know I speak for Marjorie and Adela and Robert and I, that you are the folks that we have the most respect for, and the thing that's brought us here today, the people who resource social change, that are at the front lines of that work, communicating and doing the fundraising, are so critical and are often overlooked and unsung in this work. And so you are the champions as far as we're concerned. Before I turn it over to your cockpit crew today, Robert, Adela, and Margie, I also want to introduce the engineer, Luigi from the Leaders Trust, who is running tech for us on the fly today. And we're really grateful to you, Luigi, for doing that today. I wanted to say a couple words about how did we come to write this report, and what brought us to this moment today of sharing this lightning in the bottle training with you. And so I flash back, I don't know how many of you are familiar with underdeveloped or beyond fundraising, but back about 5 or 6 years ago, when we were formerly known as the Haas Leadership Initiatives, we were really interested in helping to support the capacity of social justice organizations to raise more money from individual donors. And that led us to looking deeply at what is a culture of philanthropy. And there were some aspects of culture of philanthropy that are really foundational to the things we're talking about today. So I want to make it clear that even though we're talking about some new dynamics, they have deep roots in the culture of philanthropy. And some of the things that we were uncovering when we talked to experts around culture of philanthropy were the idea that fundraising shouldn't be siloed from the mission and values of an organization, that there shouldn't be hard silos between sort of fundraising and program and communications, that it is the culture of philanthropy, these things are more integrated. And then a second thing about culture of philanthropy that really stood out for us was that the hard lines between what's a donor and who's an activist and a volunteer are beginning to blur. And so looking at engaging donors more holistically and fully in the work was something that came out of our early work on culture philanthropy. So that was like 5 or 6 years ago. And then Trump was elected, and the trends that we were beginning to see just accelerated like crazy. And all of a sudden we have this, what we have come to call lightning in a bottle kind of moments where people were giving money to the ACLU and Planned Parenthood in unsolicited donations in large numbers and taking action in large numbers. And we were really curious about that. But we wondered whether it was also true for smaller organizations and not just name brand social justice organizations. So we went out and asked the leaders of some of the organizations we work with, and we heard that they were experiencing a lot of the same kinds of things. So that finally takes us close to where we are now. There's no blueprint about like, what do you do? How do you tap this energy? And how do you prepare for these kinds of moments? And so we saw, you know, when there's no blueprint, that does not keep leaders in social justice and social change from making their own path. And so we saw tremendous innovation and emergent work happening at larger organizations like the National Immigration Law Center that you're going to hear about today, and also small organizations that aren't name brands and that aren't national, like ICIJ, which you're going to hear about today. And so the Lightning in a Bottle report is a really, for us, an opportunity to lift up this kind of innovation and spotlight what organizations are doing to try to tap this kind of energy and build on it for building long-term power and raising money. And it is, we bring it today to you as a source of inspiration and ideas, and really to help fuel your work, the work that you're continuing to do in this continually rapid evolving landscape. So that's kind of what brought us to Lightning in a Bottle. And I would like to hand it over to Robert to kick off the training.
Good day, everybody, wherever you're coming to us from. I'm coming to you from the Castro neighborhood of San Francisco, where it's Gay Pride weekend. So the city is very festive, even though, of course, there's no Pride event, no march, actually. We're all still celebrating. Luigi, could you bring the next slide up, please? So, of course, we want to give a little extra shout out of appreciation to Progressive Multiplier, Resilience Initiative, and the Leaders Trust. We're deeply grateful for this opportunity. I know I speak for myself and the co-trainers to be able to spend this time with you today. And we're super excited to be here. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I'm Robert Bray, and I'm Communications Director of Neo Philanthropy. Neo Philanthropy is a funder, philanthropic intermediate organization, and we work with many grantees across many different issues: immigration, reproductive freedom, anti-human trafficking, voter engagement, LGBTQ. And it's our pleasure to be able to work with grantees, including those, and organizations, including those on this call today, to help you grow your capacity to do communications and fundraising. And what we're going to do today, here's the, if you could mute yourself if you're not speaking. What we're going to do today is something a little different than perhaps what you've done on other fundraising Fridays. We're going to get very specific and concrete and technical with some actual tools and templates to help you better integrate your communications and fundraising. And it's designed in a way to help you strengthen and bolster and diversify your revenue stream into your organizations. So first, we're going to talk about the goals of the session, but then you're going to hear two stories: Lightning in a Bottle, LIAB. You're going to hear the first story is going to really focus on this concept of how to align and coordinate your functions, whether these are divided up into different departments or tasks that individuals are responsible for an organization or not, whether they're all under one hat. We're going to give you a tool for actually how to better align your communications and development work. The second story is going to be a little bit different too, and it's going to focus on the role of experimentation, curiosity, and innovation, along with some best practices. We really want this to be fun, and there's going to be a couple of opportunities for you to kind of like to think outside the box a little bit, and we're going to invite you to embrace your inner experimenter when it comes to communications and development. And we urge you to take that invitation. Then there'll be some a breakout session and some sharebacks, and then we'll close. So that's what we're looking at for our agenda today. We could go on, Luigi. But first, we just want to ground ourselves in what we're about to do on this journey for the next hour or so. So the goal of this session is to offer you and train you on concrete tips and lessons to help you diversify your fundraising stream and build power. And we're going to do that in two ways. One is by emphasizing this integrated approach between development, communications, and organizing and policy operations. And we hope to do this by sparking curiosity and thinking outside the box and risk-taking. That's what we're really looking at today, is this emphasis on concrete tips and lessons. I also want to pause here and remind folks that we're going to talk about this a little bit more at the end, and Bethany and the team will follow up. We're going to offer you, on a first come, first served basis, some one-on-one coaching sessions between myself, between Margie, and between Bethany, in terms of going deeper in these tools and these templates that we're going to offer you, and really help you customize what you're going to learn today specifically for your work. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So before we go into the key things, I want to introduce my co-presenters. Margie, do you want to introduce yourself and say hello?
Yes, I just muted myself, and that's when you called on me. So I'm so happy with everybody today. Great, I'm coming to you from the great state of North Carolina, but I'm just here temporarily. I'm really from the great state of Brooklyn, New York, and I'm really glad to be doing this work with all of you. I was a foundation executive director for many years, and if I turned you down, I apologize, but I left running foundations to help people learn how to do the best fundraising they possibly could from an community organizing perspective. And so I see all the people here who are doing organizing and doing fundraising as my unsung heroes. So glad to be with you all. And I'm not just telling you what to do, so I'm listening to you, but I also have to do this for the Center for Constitutional Rights. I am chair of the fundraising committee. So I'm so happy to be with you all.
Adela?
Hi, everybody. I'm Adela de la Torre. I'm currently the Deputy Director of Justice Action Center, an organization that harnesses the power of storytelling and litigation to advance social change. I am coming to you from Pasadena, California, and really just so excited to share a little bit of what we've learned with all of you, but most importantly, to hear what is going on with all of you, what your challenges are, what you're struggling with, what you want to learn more about. So really looking forward to a rich conversation.
Great, thanks guys. So let's move into key themes. And Rachel, why don't you we're gonna flip it around a little bit. Why don't you take define lightning metaphor for the group?
Sure. So Adela and I developed this metaphor as a way to describe these new dynamics when there's really a surge in attention from sort of everyday Americans, let's call them everyday folks, who are activated and galvanized to take action, make donations, volunteer, and show up for social change issues. And the metaphor is not so much focused just on the moment, as you will hear. It is a way of describing an energy, and in fact, kind of an untapped energy that we think that these moments reveal about what ordinary Americans, everyday folks, how they would like to be engaged in, and how they're eager to be engaged in social change and the kind of work that you're doing. Adela, will you say a little bit more about the metaphor?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, really, one of the things that we realized when we dug into these viral moments is that it's not so much about the lightning itself, but about the bottle that you build to catch it. And by bottle, what we really mean is the patterns and practices and culture that you have as an organization. If you can build a bottle that is strong enough to withstand the lightning, then you can put your organization on a path towards sustained growth, as opposed to, just this flash moment that passes you by. And then I think
Margie, yeah.
Yep. Didn't know if you were going to call on me or I should just go. Okay, so people, I know everybody on this call is trying to build power and do things for social justice. And also, if you're in a demonstration, we raised a fist to show our power. I would like us to do this a little bit more. This is how we look at fundraising, communications, and organizing work, that it comes together, that you can't do one well if you're not doing the other two. And it starts when you're hiring anybody, every staff job description should say something in it about you participate, you help encourage fundraising in your organization, because everybody has to be a part, not your major job, a lot of people, but everybody has to be involved. And the ED has to start it from the very top, all the way through the rest of the organization in building the support and the excitement of doing this work together. There's our people who talk about being donor-centric isn't good, we should be community-centric. I want us to be communication-centric. What's the way we talk about fundraising? What's the way we talk about our work? How do we do this really well? And I'm going to go into that more in a few minutes.
So the foundation of today's training is the Lightning in the Bottle report, which you all have received. And you've also received the nifty, like, 2-page pullout that includes some of the key themes and topics and lessons we're going to talk about today. But you're also going to be given other information. And that's what we call our game plan. So we often get asked, well, how exactly does communication and organizing and our policy department and our development department, like, how do we align? This plan, what we call the GAME, which will make sense soon, is a model for doing that. And so we're going to help you get your game on in a way that brings those functions together more efficiently to allow you to actually achieve your goals for communications and development.
And one key tool in figuring out whether you're on the right path or not is data. And it's one of those things where, like, I think data is often the last thing that a lot of us think about, and the first thing that we push down on our to-do list. But really, data is your friend. It allows you to get a better sense of what it is that your audience is actually listening to. And so if there's one big practice that I think is often overlooked and underutilized, it's the data that you get from email clicks, from Facebook likes, from open rates, from all of those things. So make data your friend. It'll love you back. And finally, I think, Margie, you're going to close us out, right?
I know Adele is talking to all of you out there and all the participants, but I feel like you're talking to me too, because it's going to take me a few steps to see data as my friend, where a lot of this other stuff in fundraising, I come right to it easily. So Adela doesn't lie. We're all here to learn about this. I am going to do more about this, and that would be really great. So I want to bring us home for what our key themes are and talk a little bit about trust, curiosity, and innovation. Some of you may have heard when you have a new idea, other people say, oh no, we don't do it like that. Oh, we tried that before, it doesn't work. This group, what we learned from these two stories is, in fact, we want to flip that and not hear something like that again and hear more what if. And every time you say a what if, the room is like, yeah, that's exciting, let's try that. By building the bottle, we have the basics. We have a fundraising plan, we have a way to reach out to donors, all those great things. But this is now, what do we do if we can't do one-on-one meetings? What are the what ifs that will take us home and do really good fundraising and communication? Trust, curiosity, and innovation. That's where we go with this. And I look forward to hearing from you also about what you're doing on this.
Terrific. So let's go to a little icebreaker. Next slide, please, Luigi.
So we're going to do something really fun and interesting called a Mentimeter. And we're going to, what we want to do is have you answer 2 different questions, and we're going to see what words come up when we do this. I think we're doing around the world in our, yeah, okay, we're here. Okay, so we want you to put in a survey, what's one word to describe what you like most about fundraising? And what's one word to describe what's most challenging about fundraising? And we're gonna see where we all are in this. There's alignment or there's lots of different ideas. So I'm gonna give you a minute now to do this. And Luigi.
So Luigi, you should drop that link back into the chat,
Yes.
Mentimeter chat. Here it is.
We're gonna go through all kinds of tactics later on, but before we can really work on it, we gotta know how you feel about fundraising. Good, bad, ugly, whatever it is. So you got a minute to fill this out.
I'm dropping this in now. So if everyone can go into the chat room, you'll see the Mentimeter link.
Yeah, Bethany, you're totally right. We could do a whole session on this.
And there should be two, do folks see it? Oh.
You could also do a whole session on how your colleagues feel about fundraising.
That's true.
Certainly in many organizations, there's stigma sometimes around fundraising, and the dirty money people is something that has come up before when we talk to folks.
Very good point. Luigi, are people filling this out?
They are. Would you like me to share the change screen?
You want to
Let
give
me
them
know when
another
we're ready
10,
to put it up on the
another
screen.
10
We can all
seconds?
see it. Oh, sorry, Robert. If you're
While we're
having,
waiting, what
if
can
you're
I
having
say?
trouble doing this, just maybe you could let us know in the chat. We could help you. Go ahead, Rachel.
I just wanted to add one thing about sort of this topic, and that is to say that even though we were focused on social justice organizations, it's not just applicable to social justice organizations. That, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a real surge in donations to food banks, for example, and other kinds of critical support organizations. Recently, there was, and it's not always national, sometimes it's local. There was something that some of you might have heard about where an angry father dumped pennies on somebody's lawn as their last child support payment, and it spurred a real outpouring of donations to the local domestic violence shelter. And so it's not only national things, and it's not only social justice. I think some of these dynamics are relevant to service organizations and to things that are happening more regionally and locally.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that.
So
Yeah.
Luigi,
good
can we
point.
see what the responses were to the first question? There's two questions. We want to make sure people answer both of them.
Great. So these are very strong, good feelings. And I know a lot of you do fundraising, so I'm glad to see that you've got really good connections here, and that a number of these things are going to come up in our training today. We're going to augment what's here. So really good to see.
Right. So
Changing,
what's
interesting.
yeah, interesting, huh? Empowerment.
Okay, so now we're feeling good about all the positives. Are we ready to look at the challenges? Okay. Struggles showing impact, upgrading, access, flexibility, misinterpretation, very interesting, competition, collaboration, imposter syndrome. Wow. A lot of feelings here.
Buy-in, interesting.
Buy-in.
Is that
Yeah.
organizational buy-in or buy-in from the target donor? Or that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of feelings here, and as you can
Great.
see, we bring to this work a lot of different histories in ourselves and how we engage our organizations and how we tell the stories that we're trying to communicate to people in a way that matters to them. So let's move on to the next part. Adela.
All right. So that Mentimeter really actually spoke to me, especially whatever soul wrote imposter syndrome. As a communications person, there are often silos that happen within an organization, right? Departmentally. There are also silos that happen in your own minds, right? And so for the first several years of my career, I remember thinking like, I am a programmatic communications person. That means I do not touch development. And it actually took a little bit of a mind shift for me to see myself as somebody who could engage in fundraising communication strategy and saw it as really an important part of advancing the overall mission of my organization. And so I totally get the imposter syndrome thing. I still sometimes have to remind myself, like, it's okay, like programmatic comms people can do this. So I have the honor of sharing a little bit of my own experience and my former organization's experience of really tremendous growth in terms of platform and donor base that occurred within a pretty short time period. We're going to do it in a little bit of a play in 3 acts, mainly because one thing that I think is really interesting about this particular case study is the iterative approach that development and communication staff took toward growing. There was a whole lot of experimentation that happened with every single kind of bump in size and attention and donor base. And I think there's some lessons to be learned through all of that. So just sort of briefly, so you all kind of know what the punchline is. Before November 8th, 2016, we all know what happened on November, and that fateful Tuesday in November in 2016. National Immigration Law Center was, I think, a well-respected and well-loved organization of policy wonks, well-loved by a select few hundred donors, right? Mostly folks who really knew and appreciated deep policy discussions. In a year, all of that had changed. The email list had quadrupled in size. The social media list had also tripled and quadrupled in size. And as you see, they went from a few hundred donors to more than 16,000 donors in a single year. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, this happened in kind of all at once, but also over a year. And so we're going to talk about the first kind of major lightning moment because it really shows exactly how the bottle gets built. Next slide, please. First one, Donald Trump is elected. There is an article that is published shortly after, on Wednesday, midday Wednesday, that kind of lists a few organizations that folks should donate to if they want to resist the Trump agenda. National Immigration Law Center was included in that. I remember sitting there at my office on that Wednesday and getting a phone call that our website had been hacked, that we were getting a DNS attack. And so we're calling the IT people and they're like, no, that's not what's happening. And it took us a little bit to realize that our website had crashed because so many people were trying to donate at the same time. This was a major kind of like, oh, okay, we're dealing with a pretty different environment here. It's always hard to pinpoint exactly why everybody's flocking to you, but two things that we think we can point to is one, it points to the importance of preparation. National Immigration Law Center actually had a pretty robust preparation, a plan in place for the eventuality of a Trump election. We had a statement that we were able to put out immediately. We had know your rights materials in various languages and in various formats. We had a blog post that went up almost immediately to kind of, that was specifically geared to DACA recipients, because as you all may remember, Trump promised to get rid of DACA on day one. I'm very proud to have been a small part of the overall effort to make that promise false. But it was that preparation that I think allowed folks who were hungry for just something to do, something to say. Tiffany Luckett uses the term rage giving, and I think that's really applicable for here. The next slide, please, was the Muslim ban. So we had a bunch of new supporters, a bunch of new followers who were already primed for action. On January 27th, Donald Trump implemented his now infamous Muslim ban, the first iteration of that. The IRAP, which is a refugee assistance project, called NILC attorneys almost immediately because they had a client of theirs who was being detained at JFK. As a result, NILC, IRAP, the Yale Law School were all engaged in the very first kind of major lawsuit to stop the Muslim ban. That led to media attention, Twitter interactions, and donations at a level that we have really never seen. Just to give you a brief snippet, I think we got somewhere in the neighborhood of between 5,000 and 6,000 media requests over one weekend. It was just wow. It was just a total firestorm of attention. And one of the things that, looking back, that we learned is we couldn't have predicted when Donald Trump would issue a Muslim ban. But we did have the relationships in place and we had sort of designed some of the litigation strategies. And importantly, it wasn't just the lawyers working in their silos. They were working in concert with the communication staffers and policy staffers to really put together a multi-pronged approach toward pushing back against the Muslim ban. One thing that we didn't necessarily do and changed tactics later on was coordinating with the development staff so that we could get a donor-centric message out immediately as well. So that was one area where we learned and we changed. Next slide, please. Finally, a moment that unlike the Muslim ban, we had been preparing for since day one, right? Donald Trump had promised that he would get rid of DACA. And frankly, everybody was sort of shocked that it took until September 6th, 2016 to actually rescind the program. The National Immigration Law Center, working with Yale Law School again and Make the Road New York, worked together on not just the legal strategy, but also figuring out how to make sure that folks can get engaged. A lawsuit is a little bit different from pushing for legislative action in the sense that you have to think outside the box a little bit on how to engage your supporters. You don't necessarily want them calling the court to show their support for something, right? And so one of the things that we did is our named plaintiff was a young man named Martin Batalla Vidal, who is identified as queer. And he, at the very beginning of his activism career, was unfortunately the recipient of a whole lot of homophobia. So when we filed this challenge, we really wanted to make sure that he felt the love. And so we invited all of our new supporters who had come through, the Muslim ban rage giving and come after they donated to, after Trump was elected, to write thank you notes, just to show solidarity. And we thought, initially, we just sort of thought it would be a really lovely way for Martin to feel like he's got a whole lot of people around him, even if they're not physically there. When we sent out the email, we really just sort of thought this would be a lovely thing for Martin to have. We included a donation link kind of at the bottom, mainly because that's just what a lot of folks have at the bottom of their emails. But I will tell you that email was actually one of the most successful fundraising emails as well of the year. And so it's just a testament to the fact that folks, at least in NILC's instance, really saw themselves as a part of the overall effort, right? Like donors weren't necessarily just writing checks and walking away, but they were a part of the overall struggle. And so I'm going to pause here. And then one of the things that we did afterward, when we realized oh, folks who had actually signed these thank you notes might be receiving this book. We put together a short video. There, you'll see it was literally somebody on an iPhone, like it was not nothing fancy. And then we emailed it to our supporters. Luigi, would you mind queuing up the video for me?
Do you see the video? Yeah. All right.
I know that when you first filed last year, you faced a lot of hate against you and your family. And we wanted to have this new lawsuit be a different experience for you. And we wanted to let you know that not only are we all with you, behind you, beside you, but you have a whole country behind you. And hundreds of people across the country who have written you to thank you for your courage today. These thank you notes are for you, for stepping up on behalf of all 800,000 young immigrants and the original dreamers like your parents, and know that you are on the right side of justice, on the right side of history, and that it is such an honor for all of us to be here with you. And we thank you for fighting, for being a freedom fighter in this moment in our history of this country. The history books are being written in this moment by you and all of you who are making the road to justice. So thank you. Thank you for allowing us to be in this journey with you.
So that's that video still gets seen in the field. But I will say almost every single element of that mini campaign was a total experiment, right? Like we dreamed this up with our partners at Yale and Make the Road without necessarily a huge expectation that folks would engage or not. And yet it was one of our most successful efforts. And that's not to say that everything that we experimented with was a total success. I have personal experience of like engaging in a whole lot of experimentation that ends up in a flop. But I think one of the things that is really important to remember when you are in a period of growth is to not be afraid of engaging in these types of activities, as long, and especially if you are looking at the data. The data will tell you whether you're on the right track or not. So with that, I will turn it over to Robert.
Great. Next slide, Luigi, please. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Adela. I've seen that video and I've heard that story probably 100 times. And every time I witness it, I'm always moved. So it's such an incredible story of just human compassion and people stepping up and really showing love. And in the process, they raised a lot of money. So it's just everybody won in that one. So we're going to shift gears a little bit before we pause and have some questions, because you know we're giving you a lot of information. We have a question break coming up soon, but I want to kind of take us in a different direction. And for the next few minutes, I'm going to get very specific with you in terms of offering you a model for how you plan your communications and development alignment work. Because you've heard us talk about this, is the importance of integrating our communications, our development, and our advocacy, policy, and organizing work. And we believe that when you do this kind of planning, it helps build the bottle. And it saves you from panicking, actually, so that when lightning strikes or when you have a moment that you're better prepared to seize it and leverage it and take advantage of it. So you have a clear work plan that frees you up to actually take advantage of those unforeseen moments. And this work plan that you're going to receive integrates the annual sort of communications and development planning and connects them to your advocacy and organizing plans. I created this with some other communication specialists, specifically for communications people, but we have since found that it's actually usable to tie and thread all the different planning through the organization with the goal of strengthening your fundraising work. And it allows you to sort of get in a collaborative mode with your colleagues, as opposed to you kind of doing your work plan over here, and then your other colleague over here, and then maybe the comms person is doing this over here, and the ED is kind of busy doing this over here. It actually allows, it fosters this more collaborative approach to fundraising and to your campaigns and to your policy priorities. And it's an overarching tool, but it can also be used to create a joint calendar of events that you can that require your attention and coordination, and it creates space for you to be conscious of time-limited events. For example, almost every organization does an end of the year appeal, right? Well, plan for it now, and so you can use this template we're going to give you for doing that. And Giving Tuesday, of course, that's another calendar mark that we know we'll be sending appeals out. Plan for it, put it into this game plan. This idea of fostering coordination between the functions, we believe that it bolsters your campaigns, and it really allows you to work more efficiently and align the communications in a way that focuses on reaching your target audience, which is your supporters and members. And it does this in a way that allows you to lay the groundwork in advance. So when you get these unforeseen and unexpected opportunities, you're able to seize them. You saw in the NILC example that they had already made the decision to prioritize raising more money from individuals to become less dependent on foundations. I suspect many of your organizations are thinking something similar. And they had already prioritized to develop leaders into spokespeople, as opposed to just being the same spokespeople from the organization. And they had prioritized to cultivate relationships with reporters. So those conditions already were happening at NILC, so that when Trump was elected and when the lightning struck, they had the bottle ready. And they did that through planning. So next slide, please. So here's what we call our game plan. And I want to give you a caveat. Normally I do a training on this alone for 90 minutes. And in fact, in the one-on-one coaching sessions that you guys can sign up for, I'm making myself available to do one of these customized for your organizations, working in collaboration with you. So we like to approach this as GAME. And these are the 4 components of strategic planning for communications in a way that aligns and bridges and connects to and reinforces your policy and advocacy and organizing work. GAME. The first step is goals. What are you trying to accomplish? What policy priority are you trying to attain? What benchmark of new donors are you trying to reach? What is your goal? And the goal and the plan has to be grounded in the goal from the very beginning, because you'll never know if you have success if you're not very clear on what your goals are. So at the very top end of the plan, of the game plan, is you and your collaborators at your organization need to sit down and be very clear on what are your goals and what are you trying to accomplish. And the development folks and the communications folks and the policy folks may have different goals. Your job is to help align those and bring those together into one plan. And the goals should really be accomplishable. So G, goals. Start with your goals. And that exercise of what are we trying to accomplish and what is our goal here, That can happen at the beginning of the year, and that can happen specific to a particular campaign you're working on. The next step of the plan is audience. Who has the power to allow you to attain your goals? Who do you need to reach, and who do you need to not reach and leave behind? You have limited resources. You have to be very specific and strategic of who your audiences are. So break down the goals. My sense is the audience are going to be donors and members. So if your goal is, for example, to increase revenue and activate, I don't know, 250 new donors to take action on a specific policy advocacy, and by the way, write a check. You want them to write a letter, you want them to sign a petition, you want to share something with the community or on social media, that's your goal. And the audience that's going to do that are going to be donors and members. So be very clear in your plan and list them out, who they are. But then that means you move to the next step of the plan. You've clearly identified your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. You have your strategic target audience in mind, which allows you to deploy your resources efficiently, not waste time and reaching audiences you don't need. Now, the next component of the plan is, what are you saying to these audiences? What is your message? And the messaging component is a critical element of your communications planning around development work. You saw in the NILC example that NILC went from very lawyerly, official, legal kinds of messaging. They went, you know, they saw themselves as explainers of legal policy, and they did that very well and continue to do that. But you know what? That kind of language and that kind of message doesn't really touch potential donors. So they shifted and they become more action-oriented messengers. So your message, which should contain your values, it should contain your aspirations, it should have an ask in it of what you want people to do besides writing a check. And when we talk about values and messaging, that's really critical. So you saw in the NILC example with Thank You, Martine, the lifting up what we call the human caring value. So it wasn't just around restore DACA, and it wasn't just around something very specific in terms of a legal challenge. There was this sense of human caring, and that value was lifted up in that messaging. That emotional, dramatic human interest component is what resulted in the donors taking action, signing the petition, and increasing their support to the organization. And another thing I wanted to point out about the NILC example is you saw how this one person story, it's one individual story, but it describes a whole multitude of people behind it in a similar experience, and it challenges this systemic issue that's affecting so many people, but it resonates on an individual personal level. So NILC was brilliant at taking this message, adding this human caring value, and expanding that one person's story into thousands of stories. And you and your donation and your signature on this petition, you became part of that story. This is irresistible to donors. And you saw the results of it. And the ask was clear: sign the petition. We weren't telling you to write and send a check first. We're telling you to support Martine, right? And so that messaging component is critical, and it's an opportunity for you to be values forward in your messaging. And finally, GAME, you're clear on your goals, you know who you're trying to reach, you know what you're trying to say to them. And by the way, not only the message, but the messenger. Now comes execution, or what we know as tactics. And that is all the multitude of things you're going to do in your plan to communicate that message. Most people in organizations that we work with, they go right to this. They go right to like, okay, we're going to tweet, we're going to post this on Facebook, we're going to post this on our website, we're going to send an e-newsletter out. And they don't do this goals, audience, messaging components first. That's the strategy. Those are the conversations. The answering of the goals and audience and message is the way that you collaborate with your staff to be really clear on what your strategy is in your fundraising and communications campaigns. Then you go to tactics. And that's where you can think creatively. You saw some of the tactics that Nilk's using. Soon you're going to see some additional tactics from our second story. But that's the components of the game plan, GAME. Goals, very clear on what you're trying to accomplish, audience who you're trying to reach, message of what you're trying to say them and who's the most appropriate messenger, and execution are tactics. So let's go to the next slide, please. And we want to pause, and we've given you a lot of information. We've told you the story about Nilk. We've offered you this this model for creating a game plan, and what I like to say, get your game on, in terms of beginning to strategically plan and coordinate your communications and development work. Let's stop now and pause for a second and see if you have any questions. And you can just speak up, unmute yourself. One question I like to ask is what we call I think we call it like the glorious failure question. Maybe this one's for Adela, but remember she started off her presentation with what happened? The website crashed and they're panicking and they think they've been hacked and something is going horribly wrong. And how did they take that situation and make something positive out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I think this is where the game plan probably would have helped us a little bit. With the website, it's easy, like make sure your website has enough capacity to handle a search. But Nilk was in a place where there is a shifting audience, right? There was a shifting audience that occurred. And so a lot of the tactics that we had relied upon really just weren't sufficient anymore. But it took a while for even us to realize that. So like one glorious failure that I had was we had this huge influx of supporters and I was like, oh man, I bet they really want to know about immigration policy. And so like I would write this like monthly In the Weeds newsletter to our new supporters where like I dive deeper on a particular immigration issue. Let me tell you, that flopped. It was a total flop. It did not work. Lowest open rates. And one of the lessons that I learned is like our supporters are here because they are bought in, they think that we are effective and they want to be mobilized. And so we shifted our email tone toward one that was more action oriented, that gave people a clear, here's what's going on and here's what you can do about it in every single email. And we did that in coordination with the development department. I wouldn't have known necessarily that our audience had shifted enough to where that the sort of message that I thought was going to be totally effective, like flopped without really taking a look at the data. But once I did, I thought, okay, all right, let's abandon this In the Weeds email and move forward with different tactics.
Other questions, folks?
And people can put them in the chat if you want to as well. Like, here's one already. Is there good criteria or good questions to ask ourselves when setting a goal, Robert?
Yeah, so the criteria for setting up a goal is the most important thing is like you can achieve it. Don't set yourself up for failure. Like it's doable and it's grounded in reality and it acknowledges your bandwidth, your capacity, your time frame, and it's it's something that if you fail on reaching it, it's okay. That you learn something from the effort, and you revisit the goal the next time around. But the most important component of setting your goals is to just be as specific as possible of what you want to see change, because that's how you're able to know if you attain them. We had a question from Robert Sindelar, and I wanted, he posted in the thing and he asked, is there a specific template? And the answer to the question I was about to respond is, yes, there is a tool. I actually have a tool. We do a whole training on that alone. But as I mentioned, we will share the game plan tool with you after this webinar. But more importantly, you have an opportunity to sign up for a one-on-one coaching session where we'll break the tool down and customize it for your organization. And I really hope you take advantage of that coaching opportunity. It's really great that Leadership Institute and Progressive Multiplier and the host organizations and Bethany is making this available. I think it's important, and it could be very helpful for you to learn how to use that tool. Other questions? Okay, if you think of any more, drop them in the chat box. We're monitoring it. Sometimes it takes a minute for people to realize what they need to ask. But let's move on to the next part.
You got one other question, Robert. Do you want to just take that one? How many tactics should we aim for each goal?
From a behalf. In my experience, I tend to create too many tactics, to be honest. So I'm a completist in my planning. I know that I'm not going to rest until I know that every single little possible tactic I could possibly do is done. But then I've learned over the years that, you know what, I need to be a little bit more realistic on my tactics. And if I can think of a couple of really good ones, maybe it's going to be through social media. Maybe it's going to be an e-newsletter signed by my executive director to our donors. Maybe it's going to be a video done on an iPhone, capturing an emotional moment with one of our constituents. Maybe it's going to be placing proactively an article in a media outlet or a platform that I know a lot of our members trust and read. So I'm going to create tactics that I know are going to be the most effective in reaching those target audiences and delivering that message to them. So don't overpromise on the tactics, and think of the tactics you're going to sign up for on your game plan are really within your power to do.
Great. Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, let's move on, Rachel. Margie.
Yeah, Rachel and I look so much alike. It's good. So everybody, okay, we're going to talk about the second organization that we're lifting up in this material. If you think that, oh yeah, all this stuff is really easy to do if you're a big organization, this story is about a smaller organization, smaller staff, but had really, really big impact. And what it shares with the first story we heard about is that it took advantage of a personal story to illustrate and highlight what's going on with a lot of immigrants and connect people. Since we know that giving is an emotional thing to do, not always an intellectual exercise, and help people to do this. So this organization, ICIJ, which I hope you got a chance to read about them, the Inland Empire Coalition for Immigrant Justice, is a really great organization near Riverside, California, and California's press. Tell me if I've got that wrong, but I thought it was. In 2019, they had about 1,666 Instagram connections. And by the end of the work that they did in 2020, they were way, way past that, closer to about 9,000. And they just kept building and building. And one of the biggest and best things about this organization is the executive director and the style and the feeling and the sense this person does. And the first quote up here is from the communication director, Mario Perez, who says on his director, he has a unique style of engaging the team to bring people's perspectives out, thus creating a space for experimentation and shared ownership of fundraising, communications, and mobilization efforts. Amazing. And what I want you to know about this organization is that it's a coalition. And I work with other coalitions, and often people say, well, we can't raise money from individual donors because no coalition member will let us have access to their names or let us do this work. This coalition sees the larger good and working together and absolutely made that information possible and work all together. So this organization, when they say these things, that includes the board, the staff, the donors. It also included street vendors, and it included coalition partners. So many places for people to participate in this work was just amazing. When I do a lot of trainings, I always start with an attitude adjustment. This person, this director does not need that attitude adjustment. He's starting all the work and all the strategies, building the bottle, and also bringing everybody into this work making a feeling that if you did actually have a failure or a flop, if you learn from it, if you move forward, it wasn't like that. So I want to go through some of the lessons to learn from this organization, and I hope you get to read about them. And a phrase that they often talk about is something called radical inclusion. Radical inclusion says it's not just by accident that we're including and looking for a space for everybody to be involved in fundraising and in communication, but it's part of the work that it is. And if we use everybody to be involved in this, we might lose a little bit of the branding that we can do, but we will gain in the strategy and the passion and the interest in getting so many people to talk about this work. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, see more about that. They really, really emphasized experimentation, but they also took some of the initial things that we know are good. For example, if you give people a story and statistics, or just statistics, another word, I guess, for data, the thing that gets people to give every single time is the story alone. So it's not that we want to dumb down the other work that's going on or the advocacy or the policy work. We want to have it make sense in a way that the person that we're reaching out to give contributions has a feeling about this and sees what's going on. In fact, it's almost what Karl Marx and Adam Smith said, each according to their ability. We want to look at that. If you can give $10 as a street vendor, wonderful. And if you can give 50,000, wonderful. All of it really counts. All of it is really, really, really good. It also helps people see the plight and the policies around immigrant rights through the lens of what happens with two people. In this case, it's two brothers who were stuck in this Adelante, in this horrible prison. They were being having to use really bad chemicals to have to work in there. They were really sad, and the younger brother was getting more and more depressed. And the older brothers reached out to the organization, said, "You have to help us. You have to help us. I have to make sure my brother's going to be okay." And they used this story to reach out to a lot of other people to say, "Help us raise money to get them out of jail, get them out of this horrible detention center, and to make this work." And people responded in droves all over the country, because they also went and used many channels to do this with. They did fundraising on Bitly, they did fundraising on Facebook, they did fundraising on Instagram. We're noting that this is Pride Month. They did a really successful event called Tacos and Tacones. Tacones means high heels. And they did a drag show to raise money. You can see this here in this, that did really well. You can see about putting the face for immigrants for Alex and Wilson in here. You can see the Bitly with the action phones app. And they made things look beautiful and enticing. It's not that we want to look pretty and have fun over people's misery, that we don't want to stop at a misery spot, which isn't going to help Alex and Wilson. We want people to garner the power that they have through their dollars and making donations and support the work through these things. And they were really great. It was great experimentation, great creativity, and this time very successful. Really worked. They got the brother out of jail, out of there, and now they're moving on to do work to close down Adelante altogether. So it's a power that kept growing, bringing people along. And two important things that are both part of building the bottle and working on experimentation is that you don't just do the one thing, one and gone. You want to keep those donors that you got, keep that community with you. So they did a lot of thanking people and a lot of follow-up to keep this going. Really extraordinary to do this. I hope you agree with me at how beautiful and interesting these things are, the way that they are put together here. And I'd be curious to hear when we have the discussion about your experiences with GoFundMe and Facebook and things like that. It's a really great way to do peer-to-peer work where people can reach out to their community, their networks, and get those people to be engaged and involved in this. So it also did a lot to build power. So it wasn't like, oh, we've got the organizing over here and the communication here and all the things like that. They were really working in the way that I described before. I also want to say that the way that the director went on throughout all of this to keep bringing people through was really important. And the communication staff and the development staff were encouraged to work together. That's not always true in organizations. And so be interested in, if you want to work more on your fundraising with me, then we could talk about how is your executive director, how are they able to help support this way of working together? Or are you still suffering from silos, and how can we help to make this be better and stronger without making anybody feel shame, just to figure out the new ways to make this work and have this be in a better way. So I want to just emphasize those things for you, what happens, not think this is just the big organizations, but to see what a smaller organization can do with the attitude, with the mentality, with the bringing people along, with the coalition partners who are for doing this work, with an idea of building the bottle, having the basic things in your plan for how to raise money. As Kim Klein says, work your plan your work and work your plan, doing this work, and then finding some interesting and innovative ways to reach people through digital fundraising, to reach donors eyeball to eyeball and meeting with people, and to use all of it to further the work that's going on and to get people to stay engaged, and not just once, but to build a practice of working together, working smart, raising more money, seeing the power of stories and plans to make this work. Experimenting, being creative really wins the day all the time. And as somebody said earlier, if you learn from a mistake you did, that's good. The pandemic has made a lot of people learn how to do hybrid experiments around events, because some people want to be, the good news is if you do it on Zoom, many people can be in it. The bad news is you may be losing some of the connections that you have, and you can walk from table to table. Now people are experimenting with hybrids as we open up more as a country. So things more to think about with that. So I want to emphasize again, to make fundraising fun, make it important, make it as equal in your work as the program and the advocacy and the communications, big thing that Javier Hernandez emphasizes, and help see the power in immigrant voices when they're lifted up, not doing things on their behalf, but doing things together, in the way that people get to see things and see the work and participate in it. They too have been very good at keeping the donors involved and haven't lost people. And it's been really amazing, from the street vendors, donors, to the major donors, all have continued to stay involved. So I'm going to stop there so we can, maybe we'll take questions later on. We can follow up on any one of these things that you want to do. So I applaud you all who are on this call and the fundraising that you're doing and all the ways you're trying to do this, and look forward to the discussion later.
Great, thanks, Margie. So let's move to, we're going to do a little breakout. We're going to skip the questions and come to this part. So we're going to break you out and have you have an opportunity to just have a little bit of a discussion. And we're offering 3 questions for you, which are posted in the, you see them on the screen here, and they're posted in the Dropbox. You have about 10 minutes, so you don't have a lot of time, but we just wanted to kind of spark, speaking of curiosity, we wanted to spark what you think about some of these important themes that we've put forward to you today. So the first question, if you're able to have a conversation with all 3 of these questions and answer them, great, but at least pick one. And the first question is, how much coordination and integration between comms, Devo, and program is there at your organization? And what lessons from the case study are relevant to that integration? And this is, be honest with yourselves, and it's a space here where you can reflect with your colleagues on in a truthful way. The second question is, how would you describe your organizational culture in terms of comfort with risk-taking and experimentation? And how do you feel about it? How do you feel about it in terms of your role in the organization? And if you have time, a bonus question is, of the tactics you heard, everything from a drag brunch show to an emotional video and support sign-on book, of all those tactics that you heard about, which ones have you tried, or which ones would you want to try to build meaningful relationships with your donors? So see if you can have a discussion, at least pick one of those questions. We may not have time to debrief when we're back, but I do want you to talk about these within your discussion group. So Luigi, if you could break folks out, please. Hi, everybody, welcome back. Great.
Oh, Robert, we needed more time.
I know, we always do. Our breakout group, they were like, you know, we could talk a lot about it. Well, we do want to move things around a little bit. So we had scheduled some time to debrief. Maybe we can pick, let's see, do we have time? Well, no, we need to kind of move on because we promised to respect your time, and we're going to end at the hour. So let's go on to the next slide. Margie, why don't you just take a second and summarize the secret sauce, okay?
Okay.
Beyonce on the left in the video.
But I know we probably have things that all of you are celebrating. I just want to give a shout out to Oakland Rising and the Oakland budget that got passed really big on defund the police. So just bravo to you. That was a great thing we talked about. All right, secret sauce. Whether you eat McDonald's hamburgers or not, there is a secret sauce for building power and money. And you can see some of the things here, which we've been repeating over and over and over again about this. How do you integrate all the things that are going on? And if you're the person responsible for it all, how do you not say, oh, I'm communicator now. Oh, now I'm development person. How can you wear both hats and make this work when you're reporting something out? Really important. The trust really matters. If the development and the communication team, or it's yourself, can know, I can trust you to get this right, or I can trust you understand that when we communicate to donors, we have to repeat things. We have to ask for the money by the third paragraph, even if you wouldn't explain advocacy that way. In a fundraising letter, you don't want to talk like you're talking to a grant proposal. Trust me that I know this, that you in fundraising can tell them that and they will trust you with those things. And to be curious about how do we do the things where we allow all the voices of our constituents, of our community to be heard, carry the message, and have a brand that when you hear about advancing justice, people know what you're about. They understand what this is, and people can stay on message, that you do all of those things. And that raising money is not making money off of people's misery. It is taking a challenging moment and saying, we are not going to be stuck in this moment. We're going to raise money and do something about it. Get people out of jail, close down centers, defund the police, all of those things. And to see money and raising money as that ability. Sometimes we have to start with just undoing all the negative messages people have gotten about money. Money's the root of all evil, which St. Paul never said. He said the love of money is the root of all evil. I could do a whole workshop on that and help people see. We want to see you in the streets. We want to see you signing petitions and giving your dollars, whether it's 5 or 1,000. All of that is part of the secret sauce for building power and money, as amplified in the stories that you heard today. So I want to stop and see if other people want to add to this, my colleagues presenting or any of you out here.
So let's go to the next slide. And we're going to start to wrap up. We just have a couple more minutes. I know I want to, before we turn it back over to Bethany, we just want to appreciate, I want to thank my co-presenters, Margie and Adela and Rachel. We know we kind of blew through this. We welcome the opportunity to work with you one-on-one, and there'll be some more feedback about that. We'll share with you the game plan template so you can actually begin to unpack it and customize it for your organizations. And we hope we've inspired you to think about this a little bit differently, and to have a way of approaching this work that is integrated and fun, which is our objective. So thank you so much. Bethany?
Thanks, Robert and Margie and Adela and Rachel. This has just been a fantastic 90 minutes, and I think a great way to wrap up our continuing conversation about building that model and taking those moments to empower supporters and raise money for making the world better. But we have a lot of different organizations on the phone, museums, family centers, social justice organizations, and the groups I've had the honor to work with. They are just literally changing the world each day. And it has been a privilege. As Robert said, we'll be sending you email with additional resources. Michelle will be sending a Google form out to sign up for those consultations with Robert and Margie and myself. So if you want to get your own game plan together, which I'm totally stealing that for some of the communications planning that we have, please avail yourself to that. We are taking a couple of week break from Fundraising Friday. I believe our next session is on the 9th, and we will be doing sort of holiday / end of year planning in July, so that we will get a jump on that end of year planning as Robert mentioned. So please join for that. And if you guys have any questions, you all know where to find me, and have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Go
Thanks
forth
again
and
to our
fundraise.
presenters.
Thank you.
Build that
Yes,
power.
go forth and fundraise.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for coming.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.